This Torah class is brought to you by TorahAnytime.com.
Okay, Rabbi Yehuda, welcome everyone. Parshas Vayishlach. We have a very interesting subject tonight, and let's get right down to business. The Torah tells us in the beginning of the Parsha that Yaakov Avinu was about to encounter Esau and his 400 men. So Yaakov sends a message to Esau, Vayitzavo Esau Lemar, and he commanded them, saying, Koisoimru, so you shall say, La'adoni Le'Esau, to my master Esau, Koyomar Avdecha Yaakov. So says your servant Yaakov, Im Lavan Garti, I lived with Lavan, Va'echar Adota, and I delayed until now. So what exactly is Yaakov Avinu's message to Lavan? What do you mean Im Lavan Garti? You know, we got that, that's obvious. Esau knows where he was. Why is he mentioning Im Lavan Garti? So Rashi brings two perushim. The first perush is, Rabbi Yehuda, that Yaakov Avinu understood that Esau was jealous. Esau was very upset that Yaakov stole the birthright and stole the brachos. So the first message that Yaakov sends to Esau is, relax, pal, don't worry. The brachos aren't worth anything anyway. They didn't work. The brachos didn't work. Look at me. I'm a ger. I'm a sojourner. I was never successful in life. But then Rashi brings another perush. Rashi brings the famous perush davar acher, Garti Gematria taryag. The word Garti has a numerical value of taryag. Taryag is 613. Kiloimar, meaning to say, Im Lavan Arasha Garti, I lived with Lavan. The taryag mitzvahs shamarti, I kept all 613 mitzvahs. V'lo lamadati mimasav haraim, and I did not learn from his bad actions. So, here's the big question. Here's $1 million question. And I want to thank my good friend, Rav Henoch Weiss, for getting me a beautiful sefer. The name of the sefer is Tiferes Yosef, which is a compilation and a likud of many of the chidushim of Rabbi Yosef Engel, Al HaTorah. The Svarim of Rabbi Yosef Engel are out of this world. If you have the patience and the diligence to try to break it apart, it's a very worthwhile investment. But it's not so easy. The print is small, and whenever you learn a piece of Yosef Engel, you're taking an adventure through Kol HaTorah Kula, like no other sefer. I mean, it's a mix. It's a synthesis of Torah, Torah Shebechsav, Torah Shebal Peh, Kabbalah, Chasidus, all together, Lamdus. It's a mix together. It's a completely different view of Torah. Rabbi Yosef Engel was born in 1859. He lived from 1859 to 1920. He was the Av Bezdin in Krakow, Umenuchasai Kavod in Wien, in Vienna, and he was one of the great all-time minds. Interesting, there was a very big problem back in Europe, and it's still a problem today, and that is the butchers. You couldn't trust the butchers. Because what's going to happen if the shechita is no good? So how do you know whether, it's a kosher animal or not? They're going to tell you, no, they're going to tell you it's a treifa, they're going to lose most of the value of the animal. So Rabbi Yosef Engel basically came up with a very ingenious method where he had Jews go into partnership with Goyim in selling meat. And the partnership went like this. If the animal was kosher, the Yid would sell it, and he would give a small percent to the guy. If the animal was a treifa, he would give it to the guy, and the guy would have to pay the Jew full price. This way, the Yid had no Yetzer Hara to claim that the animal was kosher if it's not. Now, the shtempel that Rabbi Yosef Engel put on the behema was Toiv Shebetabachim Shutafai Shal Amalek. Right? So the Mishnah says in the end of Kedushin, the best butchers are partners with Amalek. So at first the butchers got insulted. We're Amalekim? He said, no. The only way to be an Erlecha butcher is if you go into partnership with Amalekim. Now, I'm not familiar that any Vad follows this policy today, but it's a good... Now, one of my favorite stories is there was a big machlekes between two Yidinas. There's a big pile of laundry in the laundromat, and one Yidina said, Kula Shali, and another Yidina said, Kula Shali. So what are we going to do? So Yosef Engel said, let me think about it. So he told his wife, his daughter, dump all the dirty socks into the pile. The next day he says, Nu, what are you taina? So one lady says, Kula Shali. The other lady says, that sock is, that one's not mine. Huh? So he said, oh, that's the owner of the laundry. Anyway, really, that's not doesn't capture the greatness of Yosef Engel, but the only way to capture his greatness is to learn his Torah. So let us begin. And Rabbi Yosef Engel asked a very interesting question. So Yaakov Avinu says, I kept all 613 mitzvahs. So let's examine that for a moment. The famous kasha. Yaakov Avinu, he's married to two sisters, Rachel and Leah. That ain't no mitzvah. The Torah says you're not to live with two sisters. So how do you get around that? So the famous Marsha says like this. There was nothing Yaakov could have done. Now, this is a very interesting question. People are not familiar with this. How did Yaakov marry Rachel? Yaakov married Rachel before he ever took her under the chuppah. When he told Lavan, Evadcha sheva shanim b'Rachel b'tcha haktana, he's mekadesh b'hanoas mechilas hamilva. Meaning, I'm going to work for you for 7 years, and instead of you paying me in the hana of, right? In other words, I'm giving her the hana of mechilas hamilva. And at that moment, when Yaakov says, Evadcha sheva shanim, he was married to Rachel. Fine. So he's married to Rachel. That night, he takes Leah. Yaakov lives with Leah. Was it a kedushay tas, says the Marsha? It's not a kedushay tas. Because it was a kedushay tas, Yaakov was mezaneh with Leah. Ein adam oiseh b'ilasai bilasnos. Yaakov had in mind to be mekadesh Leah. You see, but the kedushin is not toifes. Of course it's toifes. Before the Torah is given, there's no issur of living with two sisters. So he's married to Rachel. The kedushin is now toifes to Leah. So he's stuck. He's married to both of them. So what do you want Yaakov to do? Says the Marsha. You want him to divorce one of them? It's not going to help. Still living with the other one is, he's living with the sister of his grusha. So it's not going to help to divorce one of them. The only thing he could possibly do is divorce both of them. And that, the Marsha says, is impossible. Now, why it's impossible? Why is it impossible? Why? Just divorce both of them. So Yosef Engel said, no, it's impossible, because he knew that Klal Yisrael would come from these two women. So don't hold it against Yaakov Avinu that he married two sisters, because there's no Eitzah. He married Rachel b'im hanos mechilas hamilveh. He lived with Leah, so he's married to Leah. There's no tachlis in divorcing one of them. Elamai divorcing both of them, it's not shayach. So it's not his fault that he lived with two sisters. Correct, Rabbi Yosef Engel, very nice. It's not his fault. He has a heter, he has a rationalization, there's no way around it. Oinus rachmana patre. But at the end of the day, there's one statement he can't make. He can't say, v'taryag mitzvah shamarti, because he only kept 612. We're not going to hold it against him. He's a great guy. Yaakov Avinu, d'mustayukna, kisei hakavod. We love the man. The only thing is, he didn't keep 613 mitzvahs. That's the kasha of Rabbi Yosef Engel. And by the way, the Maral and the Gur Aryeh deals with this question, and he says, well, Beruach HaKodesh, even though the Torah doesn't allow it, but Hashem told him to do it, but very nice. I don't care who told him to do it. The statement is not true. The statement of Taryag Mitzvah Shamarti is Einoi MS. It's not a true statement. Let's ask another question, okay? You got to think a little bit. Let's talk about the mitzvah of Talmud Torah. Are women chayiv in Talmud Torah? No, women are not required to be mekayim the mitzvah of Talmud Torah. Now, is Talmud Torah zman grama or ein zman grama? It's ein zman grama. It's yoima v'layla. So it's ein zman grama. So it's an exception to the rule that even though women are chayiv in mitzvah saseh she'ein zman grama, but Talmud Torah they're pater on even though it's ein zman grama. Next question: mitzvah pruruvu. Does a woman have an obligation to have children? Absolutely not. There's no chiyuv for a woman to have children. The chiyuv is for the man, not for the woman. The woman is pater. Is puravu zman grama or ein zman grama? The Gemara in Kedushin says, Daf Lamed Vav, Lamed Adam Abayz, ein zman grama. So the Gemara says, so why don't we learn out that just like they're pater from Talmud Torah, they should be pater from all mitzvah saseh she'ein zman grama? Why don't we learn out from puravu that just like they're pater from puravu, they should be pater from all mitzvah saseh she'ein zman grama? Says the Gemara, there's a principle, Shnei ksuvim haboim ke'echad ein melamdin. That whenever you have two psukim that say the same thing, you can't learn out from either of them. Because had Hashem wanted you to learn out from it, it would have only said one pasuk. The fact that it says two psukim is to teach you that you can't learn out for either of them. One pasuk you would have learned out from. The fact that the Torah repeats it is to teach that don't learn out from either. So listen carefully. That means the Gemara is saying mitzvahs prurevu is ein zman grama. Fragt Rabbi Yosef Engel, what do you mean ein zman grama? Why is it ein zman grama? You could do prurevu any day of the year? No. According to the Ran, that the 5 inuyim are doiraisa. So on Yom Kippur, you can't be mekayim the mitzvah prurevu. If on Yom Kippur you can't be mekayim the mitzvah prurevu, it's zman grama.
Well, during the day.
So you could say, well, what is prurevu? Is prurevu the bia? Or is prurevu being the father of children? The Minchas Chinuch says it's being the father of children, but the Shagas Aryeh and Rav Moshe Feinstein, they say the mitzvah prurevu is the bia. And Rabbi Yosef Engel also holds the mitzvah is the bia. If the mitzvah is the bia, there's one day of the year you're biblically not allowed to be Mekayim the mitzvah prurevu. So prurevu should be Tisha B'Av Zerabanan, right? It's only Zerabanan. So since there's one day a year you can't be Mekayim the mitzvah, it should be Zman Grama. That's the kasha of Yosef Engel. That's question number 2. Question number 3. Gavaldiga kasha. Any kohanim here? We have a few I see in left field. 3 in left field. What? Oh, we have one on first base. Yeah, we're good. We're doing good, right? So we have a kohen. Could a kohen be mekayim the mitzvah of yibum? Why not? A kohen's allowed to marry an almana. What about a kohen? Any kohanim gedolim here? Hope maybe future kohanim gedolim, right? Could a kohen gadol be mekayim the mitzvah of yibum? Well, a kohen gadol is not allowed to marry an almana. Why? It's a lav. Right? The lav is she's not almana lo yisikach, and there's an asay v'hu isha v'suleha yikach. So the asay of yibum, the Gemara says in Yevamos Daf Chaf, the asay of yibum cannot push off the lav and the asay of marrying an almana. Ein asay doicha lo yisasay v'asay. Got it? Frek Toisus. Toisus says, but there's a klal that when a lav and an asay are what is called ein shava b'koil, that does not apply by all yidden. It's a weak lav and an asay, and the asay could push it off. Frek Toisus, the asay of yibum should push off the lav of living with an almana and the asay of living with an almana, because that's a lav and asay that's not shava b'koil. It only applies to a kohen gadol. So since the rule is asay is doichel lois asay v'asay she'ein shava b'koil, why can't a kohen gadol do yibum? That's the kasha of Toisus. Frek Rabbi Yosef Engel, what's Toisus talking about? The din that asay is not doichel lois asay v'asay she'ein shava b'koil is a real asay. But the asay of yibum is also ein shava b'koil. The din that an asay could push off a lav and asay she'ein shava b'koil is when it's a full-fledged asay, but when the asay itself is ein shava b'koil, it cannot push off a lav asay she'ein shava b'koil. Now, why is yibum ein shava b'koil? Says Rabbi Yosef Engel, because there's a yid who's never allowed to do yibum. Who's that? The melech. The Gemara says in Sanhedrin on Daf Yud Ches, the Mishnah says melech eino miyabim. Memela, the asay of yibum is ein shava b'koil. So it's ein shava b'koil. Why? What's Toisus asking? It should push off the lava asay, which ein shava b'koil. But the asay itself is ein shava b'koil. This is the kasha of Yosef Engel. There's a kasha Orchaner. Again, 3 kashas. Question number 1: Yaakov Avinu cannot say he kept taryag. Question number 2: why is prurevu ein zman grama? It's zman grama. You can't do it on Yom Kippur. And number 3: how could the asay of yibum push off a lava asay she'ein shava b'koil? The asay itself is ein shava b'koil. Comes Rabbi Yosef Engel, and he advances one of his major theses. That's the word. Theses, right? Theses. And that is, you're allowed to be missing one. And if you're missing one, it doesn't matter. If you're only missing one, it doesn't matter. The question was, but prurevu is zman grama because you're not allowed to do it on Yom Kippur. It's only one day a year, but you're allowed to do it 364. If you're allowed to do it 364, that's good enough. 364 is ki'ilu, you're allowed to do it every day of the year. But there's a day you're not allowed to do it. 1 is not an exception. 1 is not counted. If you're missing 1, if you're off by 1, that is irrelevant. It's nothing. It doesn't make a difference. You're allowed to be chasar achas. The Gemara, the Tosfos asks, let the asay of Yibum push off the lav asay shein shavakol. But what do you mean the asay is ain't a shavakol? Because the king can't do Yibum. The king, how many people are kings? There's only one guy is the king. One is not an exception to the rule. We'll come back later to Yaakov Avinu and the Taryag mitzvahs. Marv Rabbi the Aruch LaNer in Yevamis Daf Chaf also says, take a look at number 12, Inami yesh loymar, mishum echad miklal yisrael she'noyeg b'ya mitzvah, loy mikri einoy shavavakal. And then Rabbi Yosef Engel goes on a voyage through Kol HaTorah Kula, bringing raya after raya, that you're allowed to be missing one. And we'll explain why you're allowed to be missing one. I mean, imagine you call somebody up on the phone, and you dial, his cell phone, you dial 918-523-5632. You're not getting him, you're not going to have a call with a little static, right? You put in the combination, you're off, it doesn't work. You put your tefillin a hair's breadth, shaloi b'makaymai, lo yatsa klal. Lo yatsa klal. So why are you allowed to be missing one? What's the inyan that you're allowed to be missing one? But says Rabbi Yosef Engel, let's talk about the red heifer. You know the red heifer? You know that drink? You know the drink? The alcoholic beverage? Red Bull, right? Red Bull. You know that the owner of Red Bull was Nifter Shabbos Parshas Paraduma. You know about that? Anyway, the Torah says like this: the Paraduma has to be Tamimos. Tamimos. That means completely red. Says Rashi, Tamima be'admimos. Shemhayuba shtei sara ishcharos. So if it has two black hairs, it's possible. What do you mean? If it has one black hair, it's Tamimos. Yes. One black hair, get over it. It's still Tamimos. But if it's two black hairs only, then it's not Tamimos. Another raya. Question. So I go over to you, I say, I want to buy a car. How much is the car? $20,000. So imagine you give me the car, and I give you $10,000. And you say, Rabbi, where's my other $10,000? I'll let you know. And a month later, I'll let you know. And a month later, this is not a regalaches. I'm not available right now, right? Is it a good sale? I paid half for it. Is it a good sale? That's a mekach tos. So we agreed to exchange money for the car. If I don't pay the money, I don't get the car. And yet the Gemara in Gematria and Zayin is an amazing shaila. The Gemara is a shaila. A guy sold a donkey to his friend for $100. And the guy paid $99, and then the seller's trying to get the last dollar. And the buyer's saying, I'll get it to you not now, and he can't get it out. Is the sale valid, or is it a mekach tos? Says Rabbi Yosef Engel, Ribbana da Almakula, how could it be a good sale? The agreement was, if you give $100, you get the donkey. He didn't give $100. The sale should be off. No, there's a tzad in the Gemara, the sale is on, and you take him to Bezin for the other $1. Now $2, the sale is off. It's a mekach tos. You don't have to take him to Bezin. But for $1, the Gemara has a strong tzad to say, the sale is on, and you have to sue him in court. Why? Says Rabbi Yosef Engel, a raya again that if you're off by one, it doesn't really matter. Avada, you could mun him for the $1. You could take him to court. You could sue him. But the sale is a valid sale. Another raya. So far we have 5 rayas. Okay. Another raya. The Mishnah Masechta Shabbos Daf Zayin Amud Beis. Avos malachos arbaim chasar achas. Correct the Tosfos Yom Tov, what kind of lashon is it? I mean, it's a backward way to talk. Say, Teisha ushloishim. 2 words. Why? Arbaim chasar achas. That's like, that's not a straight way to talk. Why arbaim chasar achas? So the Tosfos Yom Tov basically says, you're right. It's not really the correct way to speak. But it said it that way, agav the Mishnah in Makos. In Makos it says, we administer arbaim chasar achas. And there it has to say Arbaim Chasar Achas, because the Torah says Arbaim Yakenu, and the rabbis come along and they take away 1. So there it's appropriate to say Arbaim Chasar Achas, because the Chumash says 40, and the Rabbanim take away 1, so there 40 minus 1 is correct. So Agav, the Mishnah Makos, the Mishnah on Shabbos says 40 minus 1. But says Rabbi Yosef Engel, that doesn't explain everywhere. In Zvachim, Kuf Yud Chesam and Beis, the Gemara says, Tanar Rabbanon, how long did the Oyel Moed stand? For how many years? Arbaim Chasar Achas, because it wasn't built until the second year in the Midbar. Says Rabbi Yosef Engel, what are you going to say? It said Arbam Chasar Achas by the Oyel Moed Agav the Mishnah Makos. Says Rabbi Yosef Engel, let me explain something to you. The reason why if you're off by 1, it doesn't matter, is the rule of the Balei Remez, right? Like Reb Sender said before, when it comes to Gematria, you're allowed to be off by 1. Why? What's the logic of that? Here's the logic. The logic is that when you have particular numbers, let's say I have 5 cups. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And now there are 5 cups here. The entity of the group of these 5 cups is 1 as well. It's an entity. The entity is the group. And the group could be counted as another. That's called Im HaKoilel. The meaning of Im HaKoilel is, besides the details, there's also the entity of the group. The entity of the group also has a significance in and of itself. Therefore, says Rabbi Yosef Engel, the truth is, whenever you count anything, whether it's years in the Oyel Moed, whether it's Malchus, or whether it's number of Malachos, at the end of the day, even if you count 39, the entity of that group is a 40th. So it's really 40, but then when you count them as individuals, it's Chasar Achas. So it's really correct, it's accurate always to use the term Arbaim Chasar Achas, because you could always make the case that the added group, the group as an entity, could be counted as well. And we're going to explain that. That's not what the Balei Remez, now there are 2 inyanim. Sometimes in the Balei Remezim they'll say, the Gematria of this is 50, and Im Hamila with the word, it's 51. We're not talking about Im Hamila. We're talking about Im HaKoilel. Im HaKoilel is a different idea. And I'm sure we've always heard this idea mentioned, but maybe we never understood. The idea is the group, not as a bunch of individual details. The group is counted as 1. It's another thing to be able to count over here. Now, let me just point out that, in the footnotes over there in the Sefer, it says, the truth is, this has a source in the Rishonim, the Rosh. The Rosh, in Masechta Pesachim, famous Rosh, he wants to know, okay, raise your hand. Who here counts Sfiras HaOmer 50 days? Good. We count 49 days. But the Torah says, Tisbur Chamishim Yom. Says the Rosh, you got to be kidding me. If you count 49, that's 50. That is 50. That's 50. It's close enough. The Torah rounds up to the closest number. You know what the proof is, says the Rosh? It's an amazing thing. It says in Parshas Vayigash, V'hanefesh lebeis Yaakov, how many? Shivim. So Rashi's right? If you count them, you only have 69. So Rashi has to squeeze in Yocheved. She was born Ben Achaimis. Says the Rosh, what are you hacking the Chainik? Once you count 69, that's 70. What are you hacking at China? Yocheved, she could stay home. We don't need to count Yocheved. It's in my koilel. The Torah rounds off. Another raya, the Rosh says. It says until you get 40 Malchus, but you only get 39? Come on. 39 is 40. We don't care. We round it up. So this is the idea, Rabbi Yosef Engel, that we really don't make a big deal if it's missing 1. I'll give you another example. The Gemara in Brachas. Take a look at number 22. Okay, so we're quickly running through Kala Torah Kula. It's good to chazer, the entirety of Shas Bavli and Yushalmi every so often. So let's do it very quickly. The Gemara has a Shailem Sechta Brachas Mem Zayin Amud Beis. Amar Rav Huna. 9 people and an Aroin count as a minyan. Now you want to know which shul would ever need to count an Aroin as a 10th. Like which shul has a problem getting a 10th person? By the way, in our shul over here, we have a 7 o'clock minyan. If anybody wants to help us out, that almost every day we need to find a 10th. And unfortunately, we don't paskin like this Gemara's Havamina that we could count the Aroin. If we did, it would be a good idea. But the Gemara has a tzad that 9 and an Aroin count. So the Gemara asks, is the Aroin a Gavra? So the Gemara says, no. 9 people that look like 10 people is a minyan. So Gemara says, what do you mean that look like 10? So either they're spread apart, so they look like 10, or they're close together and they look like 10. It's machlokes. Says Rabbi Yosef Engel, so I have a shaila. Let's say you have 8 people that look like 10, that's also good. Why only 9 people look like 10? So he says, maybe you'll say, look, 8 people will never look like 10. But he says, that's not the pshat. Pshat is like this. Pshat is, to daven with a tzibur, you need a minyan. And the truth is, 9 is a minyan. Why is 9 a minyan? In my koilel, with the 9, and then the group is 1. 9 is a minyan. So why does it have to look like 10? For one reason. Because it says, V'nikdashti b'soich b'nei Yisrael. It has to have the element of Kiddush Hashem, that there's a tzibur. So even though it is a minyan, it also has to look like a minyan. But if it looks like a minyan, but it's not, no, it is. 9 is 10. The only problem is you're not fulfilling V'nikdashti b'soich b'nei Yisrael. So if it looks like 10, then you're good to go.
But you don't do that with the Sanhedrin.
What?
You don't do that with
We don't do that to Sanhedrin? We do that to Sanhedrin. That's the next raya. Very good. The Gemara in Brachas Daf Memhei. Very good. I paid him before. The Gemara in Brachas says on Daf Memhei. The Gemara says 3 people need to judge. And if 2 people judge?
like 3.
Could 2 people judge? It's a machlokes whether shnayim shedanu dineim din or ein dineim din. It's a machlokes in the Yishalmi. 3 people could do a mezumin. Could 2 people do a mezumin? It's machlokes. The Gemara, look at number 24. Idmar shnayim sha'achlu pligi Rav Rabbi Yochanan. Chad amar im rotzu zamin mezamnin v'chad amar rotzu zamin ein mezamnin. Now, obviously, we paskin ein mezamnin, right? We don't do it, but there's a shita namaram that you could be mezamin with 2 people. Says Rabbi Yosef Engel, if you look in the Yishalmi, the machlokes whether 2 people could be mezamin is dependent on whether 2 people could judge a court case. Say, Mashmita Itzel Har Sinai. What does Ziman got to do with judging a court case? Says Rabbi Yosef Engel, let me explain something to you. Avada 3 you could judge and you could be mezamin. But the question is, when you have 2, can we say, 1, 2, and then the group is 1? So if the group could be considered 1, it's a good din. And then if you want, you could be mezumin. Why if you want? Because if we're going to consider the group 1, I'm allowed to be mezamin. If I'm not going to consider the group 1, I'm not allowed to be mezamin. If I'm going to consider the group 1, I could judge a court case. If I'm not going to consider the group 1, I'm not going to judge a judge. And then he brings a Kabbalistic raya. This is classic Rabbi Yosef Engel. Why do I need 3 people to judge a case? Like, who decided 3 people? Maybe 4, maybe 2.5. Have 2 guys, and then what's a half a guy? Half a guy is a guy on a cell phone, right? So I have 2 guys, and then a guy on the phone, right? L'mashal, right? It says, Ula'avdoi b'chol lavavchem. What's tefillah? To daven to Hashem with all your heart. So if you have a phone, and it's on vibrate, so you're not davening to Hashem with all your heart, you're davening to Hashem with like 70% of your heart, and when the phone dings, even if you don't take it out, your mind is on the phone. So you're not giving God your all. So could 2.5 people judge a court case? So Yosef Engel says like this. You know where the source of 3 people come from? The Bezdin Shamala. Who's Bezdin Shamala? Abraham, Chesed. Yitzchak, Gevura. And Yaakov is Koilel, the 2. That's where Ima Koilel comes from. Because Yaakov Avinu is not really a separate entity. He is Koilel, Abraham, and Yitzchak. Anyway, Shnayim Shedanu, maybe Dineim Din. Okay, now let's move it to another realm. Very similar, but another realm. How many brachas do you have to make a day? 100 brachas a day. Mehechi Teisi, says Gemara Menachos, take number 26. Tanya Hayir Rabbi Meir Omer, Chayiv Adam Levarech Meir Brachas Chayim Shenemer B'Yat Yisrael Ma Hashem Elokecha Shoyel Meimach. What does God ask you? So could someone tell me where you see Meya in Ma? It doesn't say Ma B'Yat Yisrael Meya Hashem Elokecha Shoyel Meimach. It says Ma. Rashi says Kari Bei Meya. What do you mean Kari Bei Meya? Imagine I told you drasha. Bereshis Bar Yosef Haaretz Al Tikri Es Haaretz rather Es HaSupper. I mean, what kind of drasha is that? Says Rabbi Yosef Engel, is that raya? It's only an aleph. It's only an aleph. And since the word anyway, ima koilel, the koilel is an aleph, you could add an aleph anytime. That's the pshat in the drasha. Al tikri ma elamea, because in my koil, another raya, same thing, similar raya. You put the mezuzah on the right side. Why do you put the mezuzah on the right side? The Gemara says, beisecha, mezuzahs beisecha. Darshan's Gemara, beisecha biyasecha, on the way you come in, which is the right side. What do you mean? But it doesn't say biyasecha, it says beisecha, your house. It doesn't say come in. So obviously you're putting in what letter? The aleph. Why are you allowed to put an aleph? Well, the alephs are free. You could always throw around an aleph. Yes. Because since in Makoilel it's as if it says an aleph, you may add the aleph as a methodology of drashais. Another beautiful raya. This is and it's a very touching raya to me. I don't know if you remember Tisha B'Av, 2 years ago we spoke about the Anusim, the Maranos, and I'm in touch on a regular basis with a specific family of descent of Maranos who have family in Puerto Rico who they have documents tracing themselves back to 1492. Amazingly, the Medrash says that when Mashiach comes, the nations of the world are going to give gifts to the Melech HaMashiach. And the Medrash Shochatov continues, what are the gifts going to be? The gifts are going to be Yidden. What does it mean the gifts are going to be Yidden? That all the Jews that went lost throughout Jewish history, the Goyim will return back to Melech HaMashiach. Says the Medrash Shochatov, what's the source? It says, Yoivel Shai Lamoira. They will bring Shai, a gift, Lamoira. They'll bring gift. Says the Medrash, Yoivel, which is Gematria 47, is the same as Bohem 47. Meaning the gift will be them, the Jewish people. Yoivel, which is Gematria 47, is the same as Bohem, which is 47. Says Rabbi Yosef Engel, you don't need to be an actuary to figure out Yoivel is not 47, it's 48. So how could the Medrash say that Yoivel is Gematria Bohem? The answer is, there's a Perush here. There's a Perush of Mahari HaKoyen who says, Yoivel oila mispar Bohem, rak she'echad yeser, v'echad einoi mala u'mayred. One doesn't make a big difference. Get over it, pal. It's only one. If it's only one, im ha-koilel. Now, very interestingly, Rabbi Yosef Engel points out that he looked in the commentary Zayis Ra'anon. Who's a Zayis Ra'anon? The Zayis Ra'anon is a commentary on the Yalkut Shemaini and on the Medrash Shochatah written by none other than the Magen Avram himself. And the Magen Avram says that im ha-mila, it's 40, Bohem is 40, is the same as Yoivel im ha-mila. So Yosef Engel just points out the concept of im hamila with the word is slightly different than im hakoila, like we mentioned earlier. There's one, because very many Bali Haremez will say, the Gematria is, let's say, 7, im hamila is 8, im hakoila is 9. So people say you're allowed to be 1 off. No, you're allowed to be 2 off. You're allowed to be 2 off. You could still be 2 off. Im hamila v'im hakoila. Okay. 2 more, and then we'll try to explain further. Anybody know? You get a reward. You get extra food, okay? How old was Avram Avinu, when he left Terach? When Hashem told him, Lech Lecha, how old was he? What does the pasuk say? 75. Very good. How old was Esther when Esther was taken out of Mordechai's house? How old was she? Well, she was a beautiful woman after all. So she must have been young, right? No. She was an Alta Yidina. How old was she? Either 40, okay, she wasn't so old, or 80, says the Medrash, no, 75. Why? Just like Avram was taken from his father at 75, Hadassah was taken at 75, because the Gematria of Hadassah is 75. Says Rabbi Engel, no, it's not. Hey is 5, Dalet is 4, Samach is 60, 74. Get over it, pal. It's the same thing. It's the same thing. It's only missing 1. Ima Koilel at 75. The Maral in the Sivat Torah says when you say Shema, you're Mekabel Omachos Shemayim on your 248 limbs, and therefore Shema has 245 words. So the question is, we're missing 3 words. So everyone's going to scream out, The 15 vavs, it's all wrong. No, that's not the pshat. What is it? 3 parshios. Says Rabbi Yosef Engel, what do you mean 3 parshios? We already counted the words. What do you mean the 3 parshios? The answer is we counted the words, but now the entity is another 3. Okay. Okay, fine. One more, yeah? One more. This is a geschmack one. Anyone here ever menadev a carbon mincha? One day you should be zoicha to menader a mincha. Can you hear outside? The most amount of flour you could bring in one vessel is 60 isaron in one vessel. Why 60? So the Mishnah says, because the tzibur on the first day of Sukkot that comes out on Shabbos could do 61. So since the tzibur could do 61, a yachid could do 60. What if a yachid says, I'm a nader 61? We say, guess what? You put 60 in one vessel, and the 61st you have to do in another. You can't do 61. A tzibur could do 61, a yachid could do 60. So what's the inyan that a tzibur could do one more than a yachid? So Engel says, Pashat. What is a yachid? A yachid is individual. So we'll count 60 isaron, and that's it. So why could a tzibur do 1? Because by the very definition, the fact that it's an entity of a tzibur, you could add 1 in that the tzibur itself is the entity. So it's not that a tzibur could do more than a yachid. A tzibur is 1 more than the yachid. What is the 1? The 1 is the entity of the tzibur. And finally, 1 more. Anyway, 1 doesn't count, so 1 more, right? The Arachayim HaKadosh, which the Rabbi Yosef Engel says is the most explicit makar to this idea where he verbalizes and enunciates clearly this concept that 1 doesn't really make that much of a difference. Number 40. Okay? Number 40. So Avram Avinu is davening, maybe there are 50 tzaddikim, maybe 45, maybe 40, maybe 30, maybe 20, maybe 10, and then in his request for 10 he says, Vayomer, al no yichal ad Hashem adabra ach hapam, ach, ein ach ela miot. Says Arachayim HaKadosh, the reason why Avram Avinu uses the word ach, miot, means this is the last time I'm going to daven, I'm not going to daven again. Why would I think he would daven again? Says Arachayim HaKadosh, Pashat. Because I would think if he asked for 10, and 10's going to save the day, then he could daven for 9, because this 9 is the same thing as 10. So therefore he's saying, no, this is the last time, and even though 9 is the same as 10, I'm not going to ask for it. So says Arachayim HaKadosh, and says we see from here very clearly that Avram said ach, so that there should not be a thought that he's going to go for 9, because 9 is the same thing as 10. So again, this is a very explicit articulation of the idea that chasar achas is einoy olam en acheshben. Okay. Mamela, I'm sure you could all say the answer, even if I don't spell it out. How could Yaakov Avinu say, Taryag mitzvah shamarti? But he lived with 2 sisters. So what do we say? Pal, get over it. It's close enough. He kept 612. 612 is 613. That's what Rabbi Engel says. Ima koilo. He was only mavata 1. It's good enough. Says Rabbi Engel, fi anal echad lo yichaj chazon chashav shapir taryag. Does anybody know when you keep the Torah, you have a covenant between you and God? What's a covenant called? Bris. Why is keeping the Torah called a bris? Because all you got to do is keep 612. And that's good enough. So my father asked me a good kasha. He said, but mumar l'davar echad, mumar l'kol ha'Torah kula. Right? Mumar l'davar echad, mumar l'davar. The answer is, when you're a mumar l'davar echad, you're not just omitting one of the 613. You're contravening the mitzvah, the one who's commanding the 613. You're going against the whole thing. Okay. But he says the reason why the covenant between you and God is called a bris is because if you're only nichshol in 1, now I would say that we could learn a very practical lesson from all of this. See, when does this apply? Now, obviously, this does not apply by most mitzvahs. For instance, you can't say, well, I only missed tefillin 1 day a year. I only was mevatel Shema 1 time. No, there's no such thing. Chas v'shalom. But I have a question for you. Let's say somebody does something to you. They slipped up, they messed up, they insulted you, they did something wrong. You know, we could say, learn the cloud, Rabbi Yosef Engel. Pal, get over it. It's only one time. It's not a big deal. They don't do it all the time. You could look over it. It's not such a big deal. You know, if they're a repeated offender, okay, then maybe, then they're not tamimois anymore. But one black here, it's still a perfect cow. The Ad Kan Divrei Rabbi Yosef Engel, except for one comment that we're going to say in the end. This idea, this concept has even earlier sources. Unbelievable. The Chida brings down in two places this idea, that you're allowed to be off by one. Very beautifully. Chida in Bamidbar, you ever notice in the countings in Bamidbar, so it says this shevet, 22,000, that shevet, 15,500. Ask you a question. Are you kidding me? You're telling me that every shevet had they talk about family planning, They got together, the shevet came together as a shevet and say, we're going to only have 22,000, nobody dare, we met the quota, nobody have any more. You really think that's what happened? So you could say maybe it's a nest, it's a miracle, Hashem could do anything. Says the Chidah, come on, that's not what happened. Of course it wasn't that amount. But once it's close enough to the sum, they round it off. We don't really, it's not exact, it's not precise. But Mar Rabbi said this is the best one. Says the Chidah, in the name of the Arizal, and in the name of the Ramami Pano. You know how we know you could be off by one? Ephraim u'Menashe keruvein v'Shimon yiyuli. The Gematria of Ephraim and Menashe is the exact same Gematria as Reuven and Shimon. Except, it's off by one. So Raya, if Hashem's saying Ephraim and Menashe is like Reuven and Shimon, but it's off by one. Yeah, that's right. It's the same thing. If you could be off by one, it's not really a big deal. Rabbi Akiva comes to the Temple Mount, and all the Tanoim, they're crying. Makom shenemar by v'zar haba, right? Mos yumas, and v'shu alim hilchubay. There are foxes on the Temple Mount. What today? Today's blot, unbelievable. And even if I'd be off by one, it would still be okay. So v'shu alim hilchubay. What was Rabbi Akiva laughing about? What was he so happy about? So we spoke out here a number of times that the word shualim are the same letters as Yishmael. Yishmael. This comes from Rabbi Binyamin Vitali, Talmud of Ramosha Zakuta, that when you see the Yishmaelim on the Temple Mount, you know that Mashiach is coming. The letter Shualim, you rearrange them, it spells out Yishmael. So I always wondered, no, it doesn't spell out Yishmael. Yishmael is Yud, Shem, Mem, Ayin, Aleph, Lamed, and Shualim has no Aleph. And Baruch Hashem, based on the Shiur, we understand you're off by Aleph, it's also okay. It's not a big deal. It's not a big deal. Finally, last one, and this time for real. This is the definitive makar that you're allowed to be off by one. So we lay on Tisha B'Av, you're going to have children, grandchildren, and you're going to get old in Eretz Yisrael. V'noishantem ba'aretz. 852. From here, Rashi says we have a tradition that if we sin and grow stale 852 years, v'avadetem mehera, God's going to destroy Chas v'shalom the Jewish people. So what did Hashem do? He kicked us out early. Vayishgoy al hara v'yivel lenu ki tzaddik Hashem. Hashem made sure we wouldn't be in Eretz Yisrael sitting for 852 years. And guess how long we were in Eretz Yisrael for? 440. Before Bayis Rishon, 410 Bayis Rishon, 850 years. This way we would never reach 852. So in the Hakdama of the Leket Yosher, Leket Yosher is the Chidushim of the Talmud of the Chumash Hadeshen. He writes, why did I name the Sefer Leket Yosher? Because the Gematria of my name and my Rebbe's name is the same as Leket Yosher. It's off by one. He said, you're allowed to be off by one. Let me tell you what my Rebbe said. My Rebbe said, you know where we learn you're allowed to be off by one? Because Hashem threw us out of Eretz Yisrael after 850 years, because if we'd be there 852, we'd be destroyed forever. So I have a kasha. The Rebbe Shem gypped us out of a year. He gypped us out of a year. We could have saved another year's rent in Eretz Yisrael. We could have been there 851, then kick us out. No! Is a raya from the Heilige Rashi, who's written Baruch HaKodesh, that if we would have been there 851 years, that's 852, and we had to be destroyed, chas v'shalom. And therefore, the Rebbe had to preempt and get us out after 850, so that we would never reach 852. Marv Rabbi say, when does this apply? When does this not apply? You have to know, chas v'shalom, when it comes to diktuk halacha, there's no room for leeway. You can't say, well, my tefillin are basically in the right place. I only mizman krishma by 1 minute. No. It's not worth it. It's not worth it. You're not makayim the mitzvah at all. You don't get 90% credit. You don't get any credit. Off by 1 is very limited. When does it apply? Says Rabbi Yosef Engel, ubasi rak leha'er. I'm just giving you a ha'ara. There's a klal. It's a general klal. You could be off by 1. When does it apply? When does it not apply? You have to learn kol ha'torah kula. Then you'll see when it applies, when it doesn't apply. But I think when it comes to diktuk ha-mitzvahs, you can't be off by 1. But I think when it comes to dealing with other people, even if they don't, do exactly what you want, chasar achas, you could overlook it. It's not a big deal. Im ha-koilel, you throw the Ribbon Shalom in there, and he'll be marbe shalom. B'Yisrael Rabosai. Have a great night. Shkoyach.
You've just experienced another Torah class brought to you by TorahAnytime.com.